Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, and that is Rob Dunham.
It is I, the co-host.
The co-host, Rob Dunham.
It's in the contract.
Yes, the mandated contract.
The like 95% co-host, maybe.
Pretty much, yeah. There's been a few. There hasn't been one that I haven't been on, probably because I'm the only one who does the editing.
Yeah. That'd be weird. If some rando was just on our podcast.
Yeah. Who jumped on the podcast feed? We've been hacked.
Maybe we should get a guest podcast host at some point. That would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah. Who do we trust? I don't know.
I don't know. There's not a lot of people. All right, we've got an excellent show for you. But first, we want to give a few updates / shout outs. I think Rob, you're going to start on this one.
Yeah. So first of all, we want to apologize for not having an episode last week.
Yeah.
A crazy amalgamation of hectic scheduling.
Scheduling
did not allow us to have any time that worked together over the span of about 4 days.
Yeah. For instance, I was on vacation, and by the way our vacation house was set up, there was not a way to record without like disrupting the sleep of either my wife or the baby. And so, yeah, it just got crazy and out of hand on that one. So yeah, sorry for not having a podcast.
And a personal apology to my friend Val, who was distraught that there was not a new episode. In fact, she showed me her podcast feed in which she has listened to every Film for Fans episode.
That is a real fan.
Which might be the only person who has listened to every Film for Fans episode, but
that's possible.
Not even my mom or my best friend have listened to every Film for Fans episode. So
I think my mom has listened to like one. I think she listened.
My mom might have listened to like 5 minutes of one. She was like, "That's enough for me."
Which means we really didn't need to promote this on our social media feeds a little bit more often than we do. But thank you for those of you who are listening and checking in. Another slight apology. I've been having issues with my tech gear when it comes to the video editing for the YouTube version of the podcast. So some of these are not getting up simply because I've had a lot of technical issues on the editing side. And since we are not getting paid millions of dollars to do this show.
Not yet.
Yeah, that's correct. Not yet.
It's coming. It's in the future.
Yes,
not yet.
It's in the works.
Yeah.
But since that's the case, there becomes a point which the amount of time it's taking me to get this up correctly is not worth it on YouTube. So I apologize if you're a regular YouTuber that we've been a little inconsistent on YouTube.
I want to one other shout out to my friend Vera, who said she was adding us to her Alexa feed. So
nice.
Hopefully we'll have another listener here next week.
I will also shout out while we're shouting out to my cousin Mark, who gave us tremendous amount of compliments for our coverage of Oppenheimer.
Oh, cool.
So that's awesome to hear. So thank you for that. And if you are listening and potentially want to shout out at some point, let us know. Let us know what you're thinking. If you hate our guts and thinks we have awful movie taste, I don't know why you're listening to our podcast, but you feel free to let us know.
There's lots of people better than us. Let's be honest.
Probably. But we're good. We're good too.
There's only one Ryan and one Rob.
There is.
That movie podcast. Oh, there's probably more than one, but we're the only ones that matter.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is not a bragging podcast.
This is not a bragging podcast. Definitely not. But it will be a good show for you, and we will talk about the new movies. We'll continue to talk about the box office. We're going to give you some of our favorite directors who we may not have mentioned or talked about very much. If you're looking for someone else's movies to check out from a directorial standpoint, somebody you might have overlooked or a director you might not be familiar with, we're gonna do that in our discussion section. And of course, we'll do our watch list where we tell you what movies we watched this week. All righty, let's get after it. Rob, you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Awesome. So let's give a box office update. This is an interesting box office this week. It is full of new movies, and we're clearing out the old stuff from the end of summer here. in this week's box office. So it's kind of turning of the page, if you will, from the summer season to the fall. I think is kind of officially here based on the box office results. So we have a new number one this week in its first week of release, The Nun 2. I know you saw this one. We'll get to that later. 32 million.
It's pretty good.
32 million, which we'll talk about that in a moment. That's a solid debut for The Nun 2. Number two in its second week was The Equalizer, and that did 12 million. Now 65% drop off from week one to week two on this one. So that's a little higher than you'd want for your second week.
I didn't realize there was such a big crossover between Equalizer and Nun fans.
Yes, clearly that's the case. Another new release comes in at number 3, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, which, I mean, it's been a long time since 2. I don't know why anyone needed a 3, but they did, apparently. 10 million came in third. We have a top 5 box office release from an Indian cinema film, Jawan. Made it to number 4 with 6 million in its first week of release. This one kind of had a midweek release as well. So it actually did 7 million total, even though it was its first weekend. And number 5, the old standby, Barbie.
Wow.
Yep. So Barbie actually was number 2 last week and is back down to number 5. It is $5 million, $620 million domestically for Barbie. Oh, man.
Insane. What's very interesting is seeing like the success Top Gun Maverick had and then seeing the success Barbie had. Maybe there's once every year and a half, there's space for a movie to capture the whole audience.
Yeah.
And the question is, what is it about these movies that made them capture that breadth of audience? Because in order to make this amount of money, you have to have everyone.
Yeah. Everyone has to go see it. Both these movies definitely hit a tipping point where your non-regular movie attenders felt the need to do it. So I think at some point maybe we'll have to do this. We'll have to take those two at least and analyze them and decide when the tipping point occurs for each of those and what it is about it, because those are very different movies.
I really think that we won't go deep into discussion here. One of the main things I think is that people feel some kind of inherent connection to them because of real human emotion. Because I know with Top Gun Maverick, there was a lot of like father son brother kind of like emotional dynamic to things that I'm sure hit a nerve with a lot of people. Made them talk about it, made them bring other people to see it. And I think with Barbie you saw a lot of that with just the whole feminist and girl feeling unheard thing. But also the other thing with Barbie, like it was funny, I actually overheard somebody in the library of all places talking about Barbie and saying, "I can go see this Barbie movie. My friend told me they had a religious experience watching it."
Oh jeez.
I don't think everyone felt that way, but I think some people did feel that way. And I think that word of mouth on this movie, it wasn't just that it was a huge opening weekend, it's that the word spread after the huge opening weekend. And
I think that's where we get to the tipping point aspect. At what point have you attracted enough of an audience that everyone else feels like they need to be a part of it also? Because I think that's the key, is a lot of movies do really well and get a certain rate, but when you tip over into this level, like and I think Maverick,
you
like
and
Barbie,
you and I are at the, for lack of a better term, we're kind of at the forefront of this. Not that we're creating the trend or being a part of the trend immediately, but we are able to know where to look for things when they happen and be a part of things fairly soon in the process when it comes to movies.
I mean, just flat out, we're paying more attention than everyone, than a lot of other people are.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of it, is we just pay more attention, partly because we have the podcast, or we're just that big a fan of movies that we're looking for it. We're analyzing in a way that others aren't.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, pay attention to us, because we'll tell you things that are cool.
Didn't we say something about this not being a bragging podcast? I don't know.
It is late August. Oh, wait, say no, it's early September.
We're mid-September.
Yeah, okay.
We're like
so Pride
September
does come
15th.
before the fall, right?
Yes.
So.
All right. All right. We're definitely moving on from that. But I think going back to our list here, number one, Nun Part 2, right in line with what we see from a like we would say a standard horror movie result. You know, 25 to 35 million. That classic kind of.
And yet we've seen some movies like The Boogeyman, some others not get there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that this one did.
Yeah.
I think and I think we're kind of starting to see a sub trend in this, that a lot of these movies that are having these successful openings for horror movies are movies that either have a director who's being followed, like Jordan Peele, or they're part of a series somewhere. And The Nun 2 is obviously relates back to The Nun 1, but The Nun 1 relates back to the Conjuring universe. And I think there's a built-in audience now for that.
Yeah.
And that's, drawing people in.
Interesting, because that is a little bit of a divergence, because we were kind of analyzing it prior to, like, there's just a subset of people who like horror and they just go see horror movies. Yeah. So that's interesting that you're starting to get a sense of a little bit of a divergence there. I also think too, as we turn the page towards fall starts becoming a more horror genre season, obviously, because you have Halloween at the end of October. So I think people start getting in the mood for horror movies in a way that some people might not in other seasons. Now we're not quite to the place where it's like flat out Halloween season, but I think you're close enough that some of this occurs. Anything else related to the box office in general?
Not really. Interesting, like you said, to see the Indian movie.
Yeah,
in the top 5.
That just continues a trend we see of just the rise of Indian cinema in the U.S. I can't say I've been a participant in these to analyze them or to understand why, but they're regularly in main theater box offices. I mean, they're not making a ton of money, but they're making more money than other almost any other foreign cinema in the United States, which is really interesting. I mean, I know the U.S. does have a large Indian population, but I mean, we have a large population from a lot of different places. Yeah. So I mean, maybe that's something for future research as to why the rise in Indian cinema in the U.S. and what's behind that. But that continues to see a trend that we've been observing for a while now. We talked a couple of weeks ago about kind of genres that have been disappearing. So that's why that's what stuck out to me about My Big Fat Greek Wedding Part 3, because that's the first one of that subgenre that I've seen in a long time. Now, I mean, that's continuing on a series that started previously, but I mean, let me look up when was the last one that came out. Let me see here. Always good podcasting to look up things. My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2 was in 2016. So the first one was in 2002, and then 14 years later was number 2. And then again, we turn around and 7 years later, we had another one. So yeah, interesting.
Mamma Mia. Oh wait, no, that's different.
Oh geez, no.
Here we go again.
Did you know there was a short-lived TV series in 2003, My Big Fat Greek Life?
I sure didn't.
I did not either. I just figured that out, starring the same girl who has been in all the movies. Interesting. But this is not a TV show podcast. So yeah, that's interesting that's in there and the way it is. But that's pretty much all I got for the box office for last weekend. let's move on to what's out this weekend. So probably the biggest release this weekend is A Haunting in Venice. And this is the third film in the Poirot series, the Agatha Christie Poirot series, directed by Kenneth Branagh, starring Kenneth Branagh as Poirot. And the plot here is The Haunting in Venice is set in eerie post-World War II Venice on All Hallows Eve and is a terrifying mystery featuring the return of celebrated sleuth Hercule Poirot. Now retired and living in self-imposed exile in the world's most glamorous city, Poirot reluctantly attends a seance at a decaying haunted palazzo. When one of the guests is murdered, the detective is thrust into a sinister world of shadows and secrets. We'll go through these one at a time here because there's only two of them. What do you make of The Haunting in Venice?
Well, Haunting in Venice is one that I've been looking forward to seeing, but I won't be seeing it this weekend because I'll be at drag racing the next 2 days.
Interesting.
Very manly event. I might be deaf when I'm done, so who knows what I'll be able to record a podcast into that. But I would be seeing it this weekend if I was not already occupied, but I'll be seeing it next weekend. It's actually based on the book by Agatha Christie, Halloween Party. So there's not a book called A Haunting in Venice. The book is called Halloween Party, and this is
definitely a better title,
based roughly on that book. This one intrigues me because I think you're gonna have some audience crossover here from people who are really into the murder mystery, Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile that already came out, because it's the same character, it's the same kind of conceit, but there is more of a scary horror element as part of it too. So I think you'll have some of the horror audience come in, you'll have some of the drama murder mystery audience come in. I think this movie could do pretty well. We'll see.
Yeah. I will be honest, I'm annoyed by this, because I really like the first two movies. I really like the character. I really like the style of mystery. I don't love this part of horror. I don't love like the demonic seance. Like, I don't like it. And so now it's like movies I don't go to mashed up with movies I really want to go to. And so that annoys me. It's like, oh, if you're going to make it and do it on any other book, any other thing. But no,
if someone could just shake their magic 8-ball or pull out their Ouija board and ask it if Ryan should go to this movie, and just let us know.
So that annoys me because I probably won't go see it. Also in part because it's been a couple of weeks since I've been in theaters because I've been swamped with other things. And so I'm like behind on movies I want to see. So I'm going to try like multiple times over the next week or so. So that's another reason why I probably won't get to it. But yeah, it just annoys me because those are the type of movies I don't generally go see. But I love this character and I love the murder mystery. So I don't know.
I know he's just dying to get out and see My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3.
Oh,
priorities, people, priorities.
So in addition to Kenneth Branagh, Tina Fey is in this, Jeremy Dornan, Michelle Yeoh. So good cast, really good cast in this one.
Yep.
The next movie that's new out this weekend is called Camp Hideout. And Camp Hideout is directed by Sean Olsen. And it is a mischievous foster teen, Noah, finds himself in trouble again. After one such petty crime and crossing paths with two foes, he chooses summer camp over juvenile hall. Upon arrival, Noah quickly realizes the camp's notorious owner, Falco, and his dog, Lazarus, ironically loathe children. Okay. So this is a slapstick comedy drama, thematic element. So it's kind of a fun, like kid, teen, family type film starring Corbin Blue, Ethan Drew, Amanda Layton, Christopher Lloyd is in this one. So, kind of a fun family, like, classic camp movie.
Like going back to the future of kid-based summer cinema.
Yes. So it's kind of funny that like we talk about disappearing genres and then like we get a couple movies that happen to exist in genres we talked about. So I had never heard of this movie before. I had not seen anything about it, so I don't know a ton about it. What do you make just from the description?
My kids might like it. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, so you got a couple different elements. There's a lot of different movies, and you got some horror, you got some action, you got some romantic movies, some kids movies. So a lot to see in the box office this week. In addition to that, something that's coming over the next few weeks is the return of Christopher Nolan movies to the box office. This weekend, it's the Dark Knight trilogy. The Dark Knight trilogy is back in theaters this weekend in some cinemas. Penn Cinema locally and in Lancaster area has all three of them this weekend, and that's coming nationally. Talk about this a little more next week. Interstellar is coming back next weekend into box office, so looking forward to that. Lots of interesting things coming in. And this is continuing the trend that we see of more reissues coming back out in theaters. I definitely think this is a product of the strike.
Yeah.
But I will never turn down an opportunity to see a Nolan movie again in theaters. The question is, I don't think I can. I would love to see all three in theaters. Go one per day, see them all. I don't think that will be able to happen. That'll be able to pull that off. But what do you make of them being back in theaters? And if you had to choose just one to see return in theaters, which one would you choose? Because it may not necessarily need to be the best one.
Well, I think the best one is the one I would need to see in the theater, which is The Dark Knight.
Okay.
And I don't think it's close when you talk about the three movies. Obviously Heath Ledger's role was a huge part of that, and all the drama and emotion and sadness about his passing, and just phenomenal performance. But the movie is it's phenomenal. Might be it's really hard when you start talking about what Christopher Nolan's best movie is, because there are a lot of really good ones.
Yeah.
But this one has to be up there.
It is, for sure.
In the list. So I would have to see The Dark Knight if I had to choose just one of the three.
Yeah, I would have to at least think about it for a number of reasons. One, The Dark Knight is already one of the movies I've seen the most in theaters. I've seen it 4 or 5 times in theaters when it originally came out. So it's the one of the 3 that I have seen the most and have returned to the most. So it's the one I feel like I'm most familiar with of the trilogy. So I'm certain I saw Batman Begins in theaters. I don't remember it. I mean, I know I would have gone to see it, but I don't remember seeing it in theaters the way I remember seeing The Dark Knight, or the way I remember seeing The Dark Knight Rises. So there's a part of me that might want to revisit Batman Begins in theaters, just because I don't have the cinema experience lodged in my head the way I do with the other ones. But I mean, you can never go wrong with The Dark Knight. Yeah, that's interesting. So if you happen to have missed any of the Batman trilogy in the box office, make sure you check that out, because that'll be fun. All right. So let's move on to our discussion. And so for this week's discussion element, I thought we'd do something fun. There's a lot of directors that we talk about an awful lot. Christopher Nolan, obviously, being one of them. Denis Villeneuve being another. Wes Anderson is another one that we talk about on a regular basis. And so I thought we would talk about other directors that we like and that we appreciate, but don't necessarily have the same notoriety, or have ones that we just have not talked about on the podcast very often. So it's just to give you some recommendations about directors you might want to check out, and films that they've done, and certain directorial styles. And so I thought we would do this. So talk about, each one of us have picked a director that people may not know much about, and we'll talk about their style and what we like about them and that sort of thing. So Rob, hit me with it.
Yeah, so what's interesting about this person is I think a lot of people have seen a lot of his movies, but they don't really know who he is, which is really the opposite of a lot of famous directors, because I think a lot of famous directors, they go out of their way to say a film from J.J. Abrams, a film from Christopher Nolan, a film from Steven Spielberg. But I'd argue this guy is just like, I would classify him as just a solid director, and I think he's directed some movies that we both really, really like. Paul Greengrass.
Oh yes, Paul Greengrass. Yes.
Paul Greengrass
This
has
is good.
directed The Bourne Supremacy, United 93, The Bourne Ultimatum, Green Zone, Captain Phillips, Jason Bourne, News of the World.
Yeah.
Those are all quality movies. He is signed on to direct the new Stephen King book, Fairy Tale, when it becomes a movie in the next couple of years.
Okay.
I really like him. So looking at IMDb, the highest rated movie according to IMDb that he has done was The Bourne Ultimatum, 8.0. Captain Phillips close to 7.8. But they're all like 6.5 and above, which generally means that it's a pretty good movie if it's getting that kind of rating on IMDb. I think my favorite of these ones is probably, I would probably have to agree, I think The Bourne Ultimatum is my favorite out of the ones I mentioned he directed. What's really interesting, he brought a style to the Bourne movies, like The Bourne Supremacy. I was looking this up, was filmed almost entirely with handheld cameras. And you can see that in the intensity and the life of the action in the movie. And I think that is a big part of what pushed the Bourne movies to be a forerunner in the action genre. But he's shown that he's not just tied to action. I think if you haven't seen Captain Phillips, there are scenes in Captain Phillips that are very much the same way. Like they're very close, very tight shots, very almost claustrophobic shots, but that convey a huge amount of emotion and a huge amount of like instant action and instant something needs to happen here. Tom Hanks obviously takes a huge role in that too. With his ability to act. But I feel like in some of the other movies like Green Zone and News of the World too, that he's done a really good job of conveying emotion through the way he films. And I don't think everyone is really able to do that. And so that's just one that stood out to me that I've mentioned briefly on the podcast, we never really talked about. And it is just very interesting to me that thinking about him, like, not that his movies are like, obviously they're movies, they're not documentaries, but you think about his movie style, it's almost like his movies feel very real. Which is one thing that I've been kind of working through my personal taste when it comes to movies, like with some of the modern filming techniques, cameras, 4K, 8K, things like this. So, and this happens with TV shows. Sometimes things feel like too real to the point where it's hard to approach it as a film. But I think he does a good job of making it just enough film-like that it still feels like a movie, even though it also feels real. And I think that's a very hard line to straddle. And I think Paul Greengrass does a really good job.
And we've talked about before how the Bourne movies kind of came about at the right time, that it ushered in a new era of action and had massive influence on series like the Bond series, like the Mission Impossible series, how they kind of changed the level of action to be far more realistic and far more brutal than it was before.
I think another hallmark of his filmmaking style, when people think about Captain Phillips, they think about Tom Hanks. You'll think about the Bourne movies, think about Matt Damon. And I think one thing that Paul Greengrass is really good at is getting the best out of actors, because I think he allows them to be themselves and to act. And I don't think every director is capable of that. And, granted, like I said, I think that kind of puts him in the background a little bit. But I think that's just kind of how he wants it to be. And I appreciate that about the way he makes movies.
No, that's really good. I like that.
What do you got?
All right. So the one I went with was Andrew Niccol. And Andrew Niccol is an interesting director. He is a writer-director. So most of the movies he has directed, he also wrote. So that adds a different element to it as well. But to run down some of the movies he directed, Gattaca, Simone, Lord of War, In Time, The Host, Good Kill, and Anon. And these are some really, really good movies. And also I should say that on the writer's side, he also wrote The Truman Show. When it came around to it, he wanted to direct it, but the producers weren't sure about, turning Jim Carrey over to a rookie director. So that's why they didn't go him on the directorial side of this. They didn't want him to direct it, but he wrote it. So that kind of can semi be included in his repertoire, even though he didn't technically direct it. But what you see from Andrew Niccol is you see very interesting concepts. They're semi-sci-fi in their nature, in terms of, one of the things I love about sci-fi in general is a lot of sci-fi movies start with an interesting premise and then explore what that means from there. And a lot of Andrew Niccol's films are very much like that. However, unlike sci-fi, they are significant. Most of them are significantly more grounded on Earth, and grounded less at an ethereal kind of space, major sciencey, and much more about the human element of those concepts. So for instance, you just look at Gattaca. Gattaca is a movie about a guy trying to pursue a career in space. It has absolutely nothing to do with space. None of the scenes have to do with space. None of it. It is about the human element, about the difference between determinism and free will, how much you can achieve, how much can you transcend your biology, how much does your biology determine what you do. So it's a fascinating concept, but that's typical of what he does. It's kind of high-end concepts, that then he explores what that means from a human element. Simone, it's been a long time since I've seen Simone, but just to give you a quick, a producer's film is endangered when a star walks off, and so he decides to digitally create an actress to substitute for the star, and the digital actress becomes an overnight sensation that everyone thinks is a real person. So playing around with that concept of reality versus non-reality, and I'm playing around with that concept. Even like the Truman Show is about the rise of reality television and what that means for life. In Time, exploring the concepts of time, and also wealth and distribution. But it's a high interesting concept, but he plays it out over what it means for humanity and how humanity tackles this. So it's much more grounded than others. Fascinating one here is Lord of War. This has come up again recently because it's about an arms dealer. This arms dealer who became this massive former Russian guy who became a massive arms trader. This movie came back into prominence recently because the Biden administration traded the guy this movie was about for Brittany Griner. So this is the guy they shipped back to Russia in order to get the WNBA player Brittany Griner back.
It's unfortunate we couldn't have sent them Jared Leto instead. I know Nicolas Cage played him, but he was in the movie.
Jared Leto was in this movie. He played Nicolas Cage's brother.
Yeah.
In this. So, but a fascinating movie nonetheless. The Host was another one that had a little bit of a sci-fi element to it, but that was based on a young adult novel. So some really, really good concepts. The other thing I love about Andrew Niccol is he has a contemplative pacing to the movies. These are not fast-paced movies. They're almost a little bit slow in how he does it, because he wants you thinking about the movie the whole time. He wants you interacting with the concepts and the ideas. They're not like boom, 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 boom. You're not rushing through it. He takes his time with it. And so I tend to not love slower paced movies, but a lot of he's right on that fine line where he lets you think about it, but he don't feel like it's dragging on.
Yeah, I think you're seeing some of the subtle differences between how directors direct.
Yeah.
What their primary motivation and focus is. Because like I said with Paul Greengrass, it's really seems to be about putting the actors in front, and with
Yeah.
Andrew Nichols kind of putting the concept or the story in front.
Yeah.
Because you can really appreciate those movies without having any idea who's in them necessarily. Justin Timberlake.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about it is I do appreciate and enjoy his visual style. His visual style tends to be a much more clean aesthetic. It does have some modern sensibilities, like modern minimalistic sensibilities in a lot of his movies. You see that in Gattaca, you see it in Time, you see it in The Host. Not all of them. I mean, Lord of War doesn't really do that, but Lord of War is kind of a semi-autobiographical, semi-biographical and historical thing. So he's pulling from real material. So you don't have that element, but there is a modern, clean aesthetic that I appreciate and enjoy in movies that, you know, it makes me visually engaged with them. So yeah. Gattaca is on my list of all-time favorite movies. Have you seen any of these other ones? And do you have
I have seen In Time.
Okay.
Oh, that was pretty good. That was the one with Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
Lord of War is one of probably my, if I had to make a list, it's in the top 100 somewhere of movies I've seen.
Yeah.
Someday we got to sit down and make those.
I've been organically working on my list.
Okay.
Whenever I think of one or I see one or I watch one, I'm like, oh, that's on my list. Then I just add it. So I'm not sitting down and like writing up a list right now, but I'm like organically adding them. So far, I think it's got 27 on it.
Nice.
But yeah, so I need to at least get to 50 on this list. So we'll see what my top 50 are, and then we'll start weeding things out. Do they really belong or not?
Nice.
But yeah, anything else on this?
No.
Yeah, so I highly recommend checking out both Andrew Nichols and Paul Greengrass. And as you watch the movies, look for commonalities. Look for things you like. Look for ways that you can see the director's style coming out. It's really fun to do. If you've never taken the time to just watch through a director's movies, it's a fascinating way to get a sense of what a director is all about and their personal style. It really does make a difference. So try that sometime. And maybe you want to try Andrew Nichols or Paul Greengrass. All right. So let's move on to our watch list. Movies we've watched over the last week, and we'll tell you a little bit about them. What'd you watch?
I watched one really awful movie.
Okay. All right. I'm down for this.
So I watched Woody Woodpecker from 2017.
Really? I don't remember that I knew that movie came out.
Neither did I. And there's probably a good reason for that. So I watched it what's the guy's name? Now I gotta look my thing up. Just 1 second. I have the movie pulled up here. Timothy Amundsen is the main character. And Woody Woodpecker is voiced by Eric Bauza. I don't know who that is. He sounds like Woody Woodpecker. And the movie on Letterboxd, which is the app I use to track my movie watching, on that you can rate movies just like kind of like IMDb. And it has a 1.6 out of 5 overall rating. And the lowest rating you can give a movie is 0.5, half star out of 5. And it has 24,000 half-star ratings out of like 70,000.
All right. Ratings. So you got to tell me, why is this movie so bad?
So I said earlier, like that concept of sometimes a movie feels too real to be a movie.
Okay.
So I think this suffers a lot from that. It just feels like someone is recording people walking around. Like it doesn't feel like acting.
Okay.
A lot of the time. The Woody Woodpecker is not terribly animated. It's actually pretty funny. Like I like Woody Woodpecker, but the movie just does not work for any kind of adult. I mean, my kids liked it, but I have to say that I won't be watching it again. Although my son might. But yeah, I can not recommend that one. I also did watch The Nun 2.
Okay.
Which we talked about as part of the Conjuring universe. I actually did not. I also watched The Nun 1 because I had not seen that yet. Okay. So I watched that the night before and then watched The Nun 2. And I would say that I didn't find either of them super scary. I think that if you were someone who doesn't watch a lot of horror movies, you would probably find it scarier. There are certainly some scary scenes and elements to it. The second one, there's actually one scene that made me jump. That was actually really well executed. I won't give anything away about it other than it was a newsstand, but it was really cool how they did the scene. I like the stories overall, and that the end of the movie they tied it into the Conjuring universe, which is where it came out of, kind of like moving forward, like it might be part of something, another one of their movies that come out.
Okay.
So, if you like horror movies, I would definitely say it's worth a watch. Like I said, I think it's kind of middle of the road
Okay.
horror. So if you watch a lot, you probably won't be super scared by it. But it clearly has a following and an audience. Like I said, with the $30+ million we saw,
Yeah,
there are people who wanted to see it. So
definitely. Interesting. Okay. So I watched 2 movies this past week. One of them was I rewatched The Secret Life of Walter Mitty with my wife. And I just continue to love and appreciate that movie. It is so, so good. I know I've talked about it, and we've talked about it a number of times on the podcast, but an underrated thing for me is just the amazing and seamless transitions from one scene to the other. How Ben Stiller directs it, how he blends in the cinematographic and the editing, how they blend one scene into another is super cool, and it's engaging visually, and it creates a unique flow throughout the movie. So an underrated aspect of that is just how well the transitions are. But that movie really is just top notch on every single level. Really, really well done. The second one I watched is a new movie that I hadn't seen. Well, it's not new, but I hadn't seen it before, and it's Einstein Eddington. And it's currently on Max. I stumbled across it because somebody on Twitter posted a scene of it where they were explaining relativity in a cool way, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool explanation of how gravity and light work and that sort of thing, and how bends space and all this. That's really cool. I like that. And I'm like, what movie is that from? And so I end up researching, finding the movie, and then watching it. But it's basically about Einstein stuck in his theory of relativity, having no idea what to do with it. And Eddington, and of course, Einstein has the German Swiss heritage, and Eddington is English. And Eddington is much more of a practical physicist trying to prove things. And so it's about the two of them semi-working together, Eddington trying to give practical advice to Einstein, who is then inspired, who then comes back to Eddington to try and help him prove it. But a lot of the story is about how they're trying to cross communicate during World War I, where there was, obviously, since Germany and England were on opposite sides of World War I, there was all the tension of, well, you can't interact with Germans, and Germans that you can't interact with English, and them trying to transcend the geopolitics of Europe to try and prove the theory of general relativity. So it was a cool kind of character study. The most well-known there's two well-known actors in this. Rebecca Hall plays one of the scientists, but Einstein is played by Andy Serkis.
Interesting.
So Andy Serkis, he's been in Marvel, probably most famous for Gollum / Smeagol. He was the actor who played.
Also played Tesla's assistant in The Prestige.
Yes, he did.
So he's graduated.
He's graduated, yes. So he's been around. Like he's one of those guys that you might know his name from Gollum, but obviously that he doesn't look like him. Yeah. And then you've seen him in lots of other things, and you don't realize that you've seen him. So, really interesting character study movie if you're into that. So that's on Max. Got anything else?
I do not.
Awesome. Well, that is the show. Thank you for tuning in to Film for Fans. Make sure you visit filmforfans.com, our website, where we have lots of good content on there. And until next time, enjoy the movies.